my pleasure to be moderating what promises to be, hopefully, an intriguing clash of wit and words between the 6 debaters you see before you on stage. Before introducing them, I'd like to take just a minute to explain to you all exactly how this debate will be taking shape, and besides that, the role that you will be playing in it. Firstly, I'd like to point out that although we are gathered here in the spirit of dialogue and the exchange of ideas, this is a competition, and we will be having a winning team and also a not as winning team. And your opinions will be determining that result. So on the way in, I believe that everybody was given a slip where you put down whether you agree or disagree with the proposition. We have that collected in the back. We'll be giving the results of what your opinions are before the debate. And you were also given a slip of paper, which we will be tallying in a highly technologically advanced and ingenious manner of counting as you put them in a box on your way out. And the side that we think wins the debate is the side that will manage to change the most minds. So hopefully at the end, we'll be able to track the shift between people that agreed coming in and disagree going out, or vice versa. To begin our debate, I'll be calling each of the speakers up in turn for opening statements alternating between the proposition and opposition sides. Following this, the debaters will have a chance to question each other on their stances, and hopefully at this point, everybody in the audience has developed questions of their own, which you'll be given a chance to then ask the debaters for yourself. Finally, we'll be concluding the debate with closing remarks from each of the speakers in reverse order from the remarks opening. Any questions on that? Excellent. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce the first of our debaters to start things off and to begin the presentation for the proposition side. Eric Twiselman is an adjunct professor in the philosophy department at Biola University, and he also teaches English literature and philosophy at La Serna High School in Whittier, California.
Does God belong in school? This question can obviously be taken a number of ways, but we who say yes will be confining our argument this evening to perhaps the most controversial of arenas, the public school science classroom. We will be contending that it is legitimate to expose students to the scientifically testable hypothesis that there is an intelligent, non-natural cause for the irreducible complexity of the physical universe, including the fundamental laws of physics, the origin and development of life. Though this sort of cause would be consistent with what most of the population would define as God, it is nevertheless a scientifically testable hypothesis, or so shall be our contention. Let me be clear, however, what we are not arguing this evening. We are not arguing that this theory should be taught in the place of evolutionary theory, nor are we arguing that one must choose between the theory of evolution and creationism, that the truth of one entails the falsehood of the other, or that one is more true than the other. And finally, we are not arguing that public school curriculum should favor any particular religion in the teaching of a particular kind of creationism, for example, biblical young earth creationism. All we are asking is that students be exposed to any viable scientific research program that is critical of purely naturalistic theories of origin, such as Darwinian natural selection, and which postulate a scientifically testable alternative explanation. Our opponents then, distinguished opponents, must prove that what we are proposing falls outside the proper boundaries of scientific inquiry, and that only material causes should be allowed as hypotheses within a scientific framework. But my two colleagues will present more specific evidence to show that what we are proposing does fall within the proper bounds of scientific inquiry, that the theory of intelligent design is a credible, competing theory to the purely materialistic accounts of cosmological and biological origin, and that excluding the inference to design from the classroom would entail a philosophically biased view of scientific knowledge, perhaps even a religiously biased one. Honest scientific investigation generates questions like, what if there isn't enough time in evolutionary history to get us from molecules to man? Could the code of life found in DNA have evolved stepwise through purely material causes? Such questions should not be stifled in, of all places, our educational system, where supposedly critical thinking and an openness to multiple perspectives and competing scientific theories is an essential intellectual and civic virtue. Consider the words of well-renowned astrophysicist Paul Davies, who writes, "I belong to a group of scientists who does not subscribe to a conventional religion, but nevertheless deny that the universe is a purposeless accident. Through my scientific work, emphasis, my scientific work, I have come to believe strongly that the physical universe is put together with an ingenuity so astonishing that I cannot accept it merely as a brute fact. There must, it seems to me, be a deeper level of explanation. Whether one wishes to call that deeper level God is a matter of taste and definition. That's from his book, The Mind of God. Now, if it is the belief of many scientists like Paul Davies that purely naturalistic explanations have proven insufficient to explain the data of cosmology and biology, and if this contention can be investigated scientifically, then why wouldn't the science classroom be the forum in which to raise such questions? Why wouldn't scientists whose science is being challenged on scientific grounds in scientific journals be the first to welcome the discussion and the debate? What are they afraid of? As one evolutionary scientist wrote years back in a letter to the editor, "Let science and intelligent design rumble." Of course, he believed that intelligent design could easily be defeated, but that remains to be seen from a scientific perspective, doesn't it? The question you all then need to consider tonight in adjudicating this debate is, which side standing before you is standing in the way of open-minded scientific investigation of the facts of science? Thank you.
The first speaker for the opposition side is going to be Ms. Brenna Lampson. Brenna currently advises as a private communication consultant for both corporate and individual clients. She graduated from the University of Laverne with a double major in speech communication and philosophy/religion. While there, she was a very successful member of the school's debate team, placing as one of the top 10 speakers in the nation and making the national semifinals. Please don't be intimidated by the cross behind you as you tell us why creationism should not be taught in schools.
All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I want to begin by saying, first of all, I am a proud member of opposition, and I say that in a church here, and I stand firmly behind the belief that creationism should not be introduced in public schools, and especially not within scientific classrooms. And I'm going to discuss why Proposition's plan simply doesn't work through two fundamental arguments tonight. First, that Proposition wants to have their cake and to eat it too. There's an inherent flaw within their hypocritical ideas here, and they're forgetting that if they want to test the ideas of separation of church and state, it's actually a two-way street, and I'm going to talk more about that in just a moment. But the second argument I have here is that it's unconstitutionality of Proposition's plan. There are statute and case laws that are creating a precedence showing violation of rights every time school systems across the United States have tried this, and again it has gone to the Supreme Court, and they have found in more than 15 cases since 1947 that this has violated the constitutional right of students, faculty, and instructors alike. So therefore, I think their plan, unfortunately, as beautiful as they're trying to make it sound, is going to fall very poorly. But first of all, let's start on the first idea within their idea of philosophy. Now, I want you to imagine, if you will, the idea of a new federal mandate on Sunday schools, and it's going to create an updated view of the book of Genesis. So every day your children go to Sunday school, they're going to learn about Adam, and now Adam and Eve are now hominid ancestors. He's a Paranthropus robustus, Eve is a Gracile Australopithecus afarensis, and they made it on the African veldt, Garden of Eden, about 2.5 million years ago. Does that sound kind of weird for a Sunday school? Well, let's keep going. Their child Seth, which was mentioned in Genesis chapter 4, verse 25, will learn to continually have evolving descendants. You know, they become Homo habilis, eventually Homo sapien. And of course, at one point, Abraham, a descendant of Noah's son Shem, was a Neanderthal who tried to cannibalize his son Isaac. But as we all know, Homo neanderthalensis were cannibals, right? So it's not a big deal. Now, if that sounds weird, if it sounds disjointed to you, if it sounds like it doesn't go along with the ideas of Sunday school, you're right, and you're right to be offended. Those biblical stories that you grew up with shouldn't have to be changed with ideas of evolution and glacial time period changes and carbon dating. But that's exactly what the proposition is trying to propose on the opposite side here today. They're trying to say that they're going to be filling in the gaps that science hasn't answered yet in public school systems, but what I'm proposing here is we're going to fill in the gaps in the church system with evolution, and it doesn't work that way. And also, that would be against a church's constitutional right within the United States. A church has a right to be able to teach their parishioners whatever they feel is right within their faith, and that's a beautiful thing. People go to a church to practice their faith and to worship accordingly. So then why would they feel that it's necessary to impose those ideals on somebody in a public school? So it's not fair to impose that on a church, and it's not fair also to take that and switch it and to impose it on public schools, but that's just exactly what they're proposing. So the idea of this unconstitutionality leads me into my next argument. The idea that the unconstitutionality and legal precedent is being proposed here today. Now, they specifically said, no, we're not trying to point out any specific faith here, but I challenge them. How will they absolutely be able to try to focus on every faith? The school system's budgets are already stretched as they are, and so to be able to say we're going to focus on the Navajo faith, where there were not only insect people, but the Sine that wandered around, and the Coyote people, well, that's going to take a little bit of time. And what about the Hindu faith, with the Brahma and Vishnu, and that creationism needs to be taught too. And we also have the Jainism, Sikhism, creationism myths. Wait a second, we also have the Cherokee creation. As you can see, I can keep going and going. But they have a lot that they need to take up in this idea of teaching the different faiths. I think they're biting off more than they can chew because they won't be able to focus on other faiths. And different faiths will be able to come forward and say that they're not being fully represented, and therefore it is unconstitutional because they wouldn't be represented here and they would be preferring one faith over the other. So in that idea, I think that that's not exactly a great way to go. But also, you're looking at the idea that specific religions shouldn't be established as national religions, and so these governments need to be able to ensure that you have church for people to go and worship, and that's a beautiful way for people to go and practice their faith. You have school for people to practice their ideas of teaching, and so for all of these reasons, we think that the status quo should remain in full effect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brenna. Before I introduce the next speaker for the proposition side, I have the results of your entry polls. We have almost exactly split down the middles. Pro, 1/3 of the audience. Con, 1/3 of the audience. And undecided, 1/3 of the audience. So there's a lot of room for both sides to sway the audience here. Good luck. Continuing on the debate, the second speaker for the proposition side is Mark Bakai. He is a professor at Biola University, where he teaches chemistry, physical science, and science education.
Thank you. Good evening. I once asked a colleague of mine if she believed in God. Her answer was, well, I'm a scientist. Her obvious conclusion was that science and theism were incompatible. On her view, and it is a common one, a person could be a scientist, or religious, or honest, but not all three. You came here tonight to hear some red meat debate about God in the classroom, about creation versus evolution, or what really counts as science. Must science indeed assume that God does not exist? Does the intelligent design movement count as religion or science? Are not our students best served when their curriculum is not limited to just one worldview? To help answer such questions, I will make two contentions. First of all, the way science is often taught in our classrooms is already fundamentally religious in nature, and unfairly so. Secondly, I will contend that science has its limits, and where it is not a good tool for answering questions of ultimate causes or the appearance of design, or even about its own nature, we can legitimately look beyond the natural sciences and the limitations and censure of the worldview of naturalism for our answers. And that's our first contention. There already is religion in the science classroom. It's called naturalism. Now, if you are a naturalist, I don't mean by that like John Muir, you love backpacking through the magnificent meadows of Yosemite, nor am I talking about the professional field biologist. Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary puts it this way: naturalism, the doctrine that scientific laws are adequate to account for all phenomena. So, naturalism makes religious truth claims about the ontology and metaphysics of all reality, much as Christianity or Judaism might. Anthropologist Nigel Brush has made it clear why this distinction between science and naturalism matters. He points out that many practicing scientists are religious, even Christian. They are indeed scientists, but see no need to be atheists. In short, they are not naturalists. Philosopher Paul Copan said it best: the roots of modern science, the work of the founding fathers such as Newton, Copernicus, Boyle, Maxwell, Faraday, and others, took seriously biblical authority, divine creation, miracles, and design. Indeed, their worldview created an environment for significant scientific progress, end quote. Now, naturalism comes in two varieties: extra crispy and mild with a side of creamy ranch dressing. What I have described here is the strongest form of naturalism. This form of naturalism could be stated as nature is all there is, and it's composed of matter. It makes metaphysical claims about reality and incorporates an epistemological belief that only the natural sciences can give us truth and knowledge. The weaker form of naturalism has to do with epistemology, not metaphysics, and is often called methodological naturalism. It refers to the thoroughly reasonable assumption of scientists that they will first look for natural causes for natural events before invoking ultimate ones. If strong naturalism can be likened to a religious belief, this weak naturalism has often been likened to the blinders that are still put on horses to keep them from being distracted and focused on the path ahead. When a scientist does an experiment, she voluntarily puts on these blinders. The mistake of strong naturalism is that these blinders are never allowed to be removed. Thus, when we arrive at the limits of experimental science, whether it is phenomena requiring an ultimate cause, like the origins of the universe, or phenomena that have the appearance of design, like the workings of the molecular machinery of the cell, or the fine-tuning of the physical constants of the universe, the high school science teacher in a naturalistic classroom is required to tell his students that they are not allowed to consider anything else but a random chance natural material cause, because non-naturalistic causes are somehow disqualified by naturalism. Some have unjustly accused intelligent design of being a science stopper. Sadly, this reliance on naturalism has become a truth stopper. The answer is to recognize the religious nature of the metaphysical naturalism and simply to remove the blinders of methodological naturalism when science has reached its limits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our second speaker on the opposition side is Mr. Adam Carranza. He is currently serving his first term as clerk for the Mountain View Board of Education in the city of El Monte, where he was elected in 2009. He also works full-time for the University of Southern California as a research assistant. Are there any members of the audience from El Monte? No, so I don't think you're at risk of losing any potential voters. With that, go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, I stand here before you not as somebody who is here to discredit religion, here to throw out a person's personal belief in how this world was created. The proposition side will stand up here and try to convince you that science and religion have no place to merge together. In our classrooms, my partner came up here and talked about the Establishment Clause and that there should be a separation between science and religion. In our science classrooms, what a teacher is teaching is the very basic belief that the world as we know it, the world as a scientist sees it, the empirical evidence that we see before us is what we know. And scientists take that knowledge and they continue to question it. The theory of evolution began 150 years ago with Darwin, and even when Darwin presented it, it was the science community that didn't believe it because they weren't able to question it. There wasn't enough evidence. So evolution continues to be something that gets questioned again and again and again. And in our classrooms, that is the piece of science that we want our kids to understand. That is what science is supposed to be teaching, whether it's evolution or some other aspect of the physical world. But evolution has a place in science. There are people outside of the United States that actually merge those two beliefs together. They say that evolution can have a place in religion. And let me take a step back. Within religion, there are people that still believe that there is a role for evolution. That role is really, if you look at Genesis, and we want to sit here and discuss whether or not we want to view Genesis as a literal fact or a story that is supposed to teach us the symbolism of how life was created. And if God stood up here in the Bible and said these different phases happened, evolution still teaches that. I say this, and you might be thinking, well, the proposition has a point. We should be able to combine these beliefs. But our jobs and our roles in our school system isn't to dispel what other people believe. It's to tell you, in science, this is what we know, and that there are other beliefs. And we cannot take one belief and impose it on our school system, because those beliefs are also challenged within the religious community. there are people in the religious community, as the proposition brought up, that believe that the earth is only 10,000 years old. There's also people in the religious community that believe that the earth is a lot older and evolution happened, but not necessarily in the way that we derive from apes, but that mutationism continued to happen, and we continued to explore that. You have other people that take Genesis as a very literal meaning. Genesis, the world was created in 6 days in that order. So within one religious community,